everyone, and welcome back to Multifamily Talks Live. I'm your host, Krista Hurley, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Saad Arij, a Senior Vice President of Leasing at Asset Living. Multifamily Talks Live is a monthly LinkedIn series featuring candid, bite-sized conversations on all things multifamily. If you missed the live session, catch the replay on your favorite podcast platform. And I will apologize in advance to our listeners for any unexpected interruptions, as I am literally on the road to keep this show rolling. So last year, we met the AI Governance Foundation with Multifamily Talks, Enterprise AI in Multifamily, Scaling with Confidence. It was a live session from October featuring Lance French and Krista Hurley at RealPage. Today, we're crossing from policy to practice. Thanks so much for joining us, Saad. Can you tell our listeners about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Look, having spent 16 years in the industry, I now have the privilege of leading leasing strategy at Asset Living. My focus is very practical. To keep it short and sweet, it's to help on-site teams lease faster, operate consistently, manage risks as AI becomes unavoidable in our industry. Over the last few years, as we all know, AI has moved from something interesting to something rather unavoidable at this point. And during that time, what I've learned is that this only works in multifamily when it's more so grounded in on-site realities and not just theory. And so with that, I'm excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit more through this on what's actually working in the world of AI.
Great. Thanks again for joining us. So let's dive right in. Now, when you hear AI strategy, what does good look like for multifamily operators? And what's the first question that you ask before approving any AI project?
Yeah. So the first thing that I ask when people say AI strategy, I have to translate that to, well, where's the operational friction that's showing up repeatedly that we want to solve for? And so, with that, essentially the goal is to identify what's a real metric that if we were to implement AI for, that we will see an actionable change within that 60 to 90-day period, and more so by how much, right? So for leasing, since being SVP of leasing, I'll start there. Really for us, the KPI anchor is, speed to lead, right? So because everything from there starts to cascade, as we all know. Like if you're getting leads faster, you're responding to them, you are setting appointments faster and more efficiently. That improves your show rate for people actually showing up to their appointment. And then your on-site team does what they do best and show them a beautiful property, sell them the experience. And we're able to see that, translate into occupancy. So if you're able to take that process, remove friction, what we see is reduced concessions. And of course, the best of all is reduced vacancy. So if an AI tool can't clearly show us how it shortens that timeline from what we were doing prior to leveraging AI, then it's really not strategic. I would say at that point, it's more experimental.
I really love that last line because it just reinforces that AI can and have been in use, but to use it the right way is where the strategy really comes in. So thanks. That's a great answer to that one. Shifting to those KPIs that you mentioned, can you give us your 90-day plan? So if a COO says, stand up AI responsibly in Q1, what are the specific steps, owners, and checkpoints would you plan out?
Yeah, so I think the very first thing in that initial 30 days, it's not about the technology that you decide to go with. I would say it's more about clarity. It's more about ownership and ensuring that the marketing team, the operations team, everybody, including the clients that you're serving and then the on-site teams are all aligned up front as to what the pilot that you're looking to launch, like what is it looking to solve and how will we actually track it? So then if I had to break it down into your 30, 60, 90 days, I would say your first initial 30 days is more about being focused and setting guardrails, right? So to put a little bit more emphasis there, the goal here should be deciding exactly what the problem is, how are we looking to solve it, and then what's a safe way to test that. And the easiest way to do this is pick one or two very specific problems. And I can't emphasize the word specific enough. I think too often we try and leverage AI to solve broader ideas and we don't necessarily know what we're looking to solve. So really hone in, is it reducing average lead response times? Is it increasing our lead to show rates? Is it actually looking to improve our closing percentage? What is it that you're looking to solve? And that needs to be defined in the first 30 days, along with ownership of who will track this, who will monitor it, and who will identify, if it's working or not. Your next 60 days or the 60-day phase is testing in the real world. And I think too often where people probably fall short of this is they try and take this and implement it across the portfolio and get really excited about something because the sales pitch was awesome, everything sounds great, and they want to just rush it out, right? I would say identify probably 1 to 2 properties, and then really test it out there so that you have a true A/B testing philosophy, right? A property or two that's leveraging this tool that you've created or went out and purchased from a vendor, and then 2 properties that are not using it, and now you can actually compare, what's working, what's not. From there, the last 30 days is where you have the decision making process and you identify, is this ready to be scaled, or do we still have opportunities for us to improve this process? So improvements can be, hey, yes, we saw conversion ratios better, however, there's a fallacy. Maybe that site team that you picked was already really good at leasing. This just helped them accelerate it more, right? And you were comparing it with a team that maybe didn't have the full staff in place. Maybe there were other issues causing the data to be mixed. So always scale slowly but surely, and that's something that we followed here at Asset Living. Anytime we've scaled any product, it's always been test pilot on one deal, then you double it, then you double it, and you double it until you feel truly confident that you have the scalability across the board. And that would be my 30, 60, 90-day plan. So to recap,
I love that.
yeah, no, just to quickly recap. Again, it's 30 days, stay focused, have a focus and guardrails around it. The next 30 is prove real value in the field. And the last 30 are then about making real decisions backed by data. Because if you don't have this, that's where pilots will fall short. And often because there's no true KPI that you're measuring it against.
Yeah, and I love that you broke this down for our audience because it is so critical. And this is how RealPage has been releasing our betas for AI to really lean in on those KPIs early on with this, subset, those pilot groups, and be able to scale that way. Thank you so much for walking us through that. And I hope our listeners are gleaning those really great insights from Asset and your knowledge. So I know we talked about betas and how you might do it, but let's take this to a practical use case on the leasing operations and even some of the facility side of this. So leasing first, what AI use cases actually move the needle today? So beyond the chatbot, can you quantify impact? And you mentioned things like speed to lead, show to lease conversions, and even like starting from lead routing.
Yeah. And this may not be a popular answer, but I'm going to say it. And I think it's very much a reality. Oftentimes we think of AI as replacing people. That's not the case. AI is not replacing your leasing agents or your on-site team. What it should do is remove decision fatigue. What it should do is streamline and automate processes that allows our teams to do the real meaningful work when the decision maker is at its most crucial point, and then get involved and have that human interaction, right? So the example of that from a leasing standpoint is leveraging AI. Now, instead of every lead being treated the same exact way, AI, as we use it, is able to flag based on the leasing behavior that this prospect has shown, based on their move-in dates, based on the number of questions that they're asking, things that are just aligning with their interests and what our property offers. It's able to help escalate that prospect up to a, hey, this is now needs a human to step in and really take this person because they're right at the goal line per se, for us to really get them moved in. So I think that's the biggest use case that we see, is that, again, it's not replacing our leasing agents, it's just allowing them to be more efficient with the hours that they have in their day. And so that's how I will say that is the best real case example. And the last thing I would say in this is that if your AI can't tell an agent what to do next in the next 5 seconds after having interacted with a prospect or even a current resident, then that's where adoption will suffer, because your team is still having to then do a lot of the legwork that they were already doing prior to AI adoption.
Yeah, and this really resonates with me because this is RealPage's mentality around AI. It is absolutely a supplement to the team members that are already there, the closers, if you will, as you just kind of alluded to them, being at the final finish line, and AI really helping with those first points of contact. Yeah. When we're talking about like operations and centralization, where does AI replace repetitive work? So versus that augmenting it, more specifically, what does a rebalanced staffing model really look like on site versus centralized?
Yeah, so look, AI works best because it absorbs volume, but what it does not do is have judgment, right? So by having it go through the volume of inquiries, whether it's work orders, whether it's on-site residents having questions, whether it's your prospects, right? It's able to take that volume in and help, consolidate and prioritize, opportunities for those respective teams to take care of it. So a practical example in this sense would be, your centralized teams using AI are able to triage inbound calls, are able to route calls to the appropriate team members, whether it's facilities, whether it's the manager directly, whether it's accounts, or whether it's your leasing agent. They're able to provide summarized, issues of what the resident's facing across the board. And more importantly, it's also able to help then you use predictive modeling. If you're seeing a lot of reoccurrences of certain things, you're able to take predictive modeling and say, okay, how can we get ahead of this? Whether it's a facility issue, whether it's, grounds related issue, safety related, whatever it might be, you're able to get these concise summaries to say, okay, if 5 people complain about this, I'm sure the other 15 are about to come right behind it. How do I get ahead of this? So that's where I believe that, it's able to take that repetitive work and a lot of the, and augment it for our teams and help balance your site teams to give them time back in their day. I think that's the most critical thing that we're all looking for. It's time back in our day to do the real meaningful work.
Yeah, hours saved is definitely critical here. Now, I know that this isn't really your expertise. Well, maybe it is. I mean, you've been in the industry for forever. But when it comes to the facility side and the maintenance piece, what are the most realistic AI wins? So you had mentioned earlier about predictive maintenance, or even, maybe forecasting, work order triaging, even smart device data. What's live versus still experimental? Excuse me.
Yeah, a real life example I can give you. Again, you're facing this right now, being stuck in an airport. I hope you catch your flight. But winter season comes around, and you start getting a lot of work orders for HVAC issues, right? Now, if AI is able to have that history and start seeing patterns, you're able to get ahead of that. And now, instead of doing emergency work orders where your maintenance team is having to drive through the snow or the winter storm to get to that resident, or if they can't get to them and now that resident is struggling for the next day or two until someone can get in front of them, like you're able to do proactive maintenance to help get ahead of these items. So it's essentially a full diagnostic system that's running for you behind the scenes, taking all the historicals that you have and also what's happening live, and able to help you just plan more appropriately as an on-site team, but also as at a corporate level.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, not eliminating those personnel that have to do the hard labor that AI is never going to run around and do. I mean, I can't say never, but
yeah.
All right, so let's talk about maybe things that you or Asset has tried to do, and maybe it wasn't so successful. So top 5 mistakes to avoid when implementing AI in multifamily. What are the traps that you've seen maybe other operators or like yourself as Asset fall into?
Yeah. So I'll start with the basic one. I think like skipping the fair housing and legal reviews, right? Like ensuring that everything is in compliance of that. The next one is probably the big one here is chasing tools instead of outcomes. Look, don't get me wrong. Like AI has evolved so much. And if you go to any conference today, like everyone's touting AI, everyone's talking about how it can revolutionize and change the game. Well, yes, those are great tools, but is it the tool that you truly need, or that site team that you're trying to implement this on? Is that what they really need? So don't chase tools, chase outcomes. Piloting without baseline metrics. We talked about our 30, 60, 90-day plan earlier, right? Like having baseline metrics to actually track, like, did the pilot work, or did it just sound like it worked and you were able to say, oh yeah, we're leveraging AI now, right? Because it makes for a cool sales pitch for your BD team or when you're talking to your clients. The next one is a really big one, is over customization. I think every management company out there wants to have this unique aspect of, yes, we use a certain AI tool, which every other management company might be using, but we've customized it to this extent. And everyone wants to have this arms race now, not just on AI, but over customization of it. I think some people jump the gun and try and over customize too early. And then the last but not least, and I can't overstate this one enough, is assuming that the on-site teams, our end user, the ones who are going to be living and breathing this every single day, that quote unquote, they will just adopt it just because we rolled it out, right? Because we're paying for it, right? So that's probably the 5 critical mistakes I think people make when it comes to AI. But it's the operators who are the ones who treat AI like an operational change and not just a software install. Those are the ones that truly win in this game.
Yeah, that buy-in at the boots to the ground is critical. You are so true. So this one, building versus buy. When should an operator insist on an out-of-the-box solution, and when is light customization, now you said heavy customization is not worth it, but maybe light customization is. Where does custom modeling actually pay off here?
Yeah, look, I think in most cases, operators should start with the out-of-the-box solution for things like leasing, your CRM, your facilities, because these processes are largely the same everywhere that you look. And there's vendor partners that are out there that have already built them to work at scale because they work with all the major partners out there for the most part. So they work with all these different management firms, learn what they're expecting, and build something that's scalable. Where I believe light customization makes sense is when you have teams that are actually not only using the tool, but are adjusting, like you have to adjust how the leads are necessarily routed, right? So we have certain unique clients who have a very much a different perspective and a process, I would say, on how leads should be managed and how they should be routed, escalation points. There's different market where you have to be a little bit more aggressive or you have to be a little bit more conversational and more experiential. So I think that's where light customization comes into play. But truly, I believe there's enough vendor partners, including yourself, where you guys have done the legwork. You've done all the hard work for us. So now it's just a matter of making sure that we're scaling accordingly, rather than being hyper focused on customization.
Yeah. So we actually have a question, and it's a good lead into our next topic area. Christopher Kutz, experienced multifamily director of asset management, asked, does AI open up a legal liability? I am not going to put that question to you, Saad. Maybe you guys can have an internal conversation, but I absolutely would say, Christopher, you should definitely check out the AI governance multifamily talks that we did last year with Chris Kimmerly and Lance French. We highlight responsible AI and this particular area. So definitely check out that multifamily talks if you can, and it'll bring that answer to light for you. But we'll go into the next question area, which is that risk, compliance, and trust. So we had mentioned fair housing earlier, maybe even talked a little bit about bias and explainability, but what guardrails do you require from vendors, and what internal controls do you put in place for auditing those AI decisions?
Yeah, so it's really important, and great question, by the way, in the chat. So fair housing isn't theoretical. Like every one of us, when we join anything in this real estate space, any company, it's a training you must take, and it's a training that you take every single year to make sure that you are on top of your game there. Fair housing shows up in every single decision in terms of whether it's leveraging AI for leasing follow-up, making sure you're not prioritizing certain residents and not giving that same attention and the wants and needs of that particular resident. So it's making sure that all that stuff is above water. For us, like no AI, I believe, should influence a resident-facing decision unless we can explain why. And when I say we, that's the cadence I put on the vendor partner that we're saying is like, walk me through your logic, right? I think that's an important question. Don't get me wrong, like yes, they're a vendor partner, and that's what we like to call every one of our vendors, is they're a partner in the game, but you should know the logic that they've built behind how their AI operates. Why does it operate this way? And more importantly, at what point in time does it know that it's kind of teetering that line between fair housing and not, right? So knowing that there needs to be a human interjection and knowing that it can flag that is a really critical thing when it starts getting into questions that a prospect or even a resident might be asking that are kind of the fine line between fair housing and the legal aspects. So having those rail guards are really, really important. But yeah, if a vendor can't explain that, then I don't believe it's ready for operations in our world, and that's usually when we walk.
Yeah, responsible AI is critical, especially nowadays with the agentic release in those models. So that's a great answer to that question. Now, when it comes to resident data privacy and security, what is your bar for data segregation, PII handling, and those vendor contracts? Like, are there any red flag clauses that you just will not accept?
Yeah, this one is easy. The bar is simple. We need to know exactly who can see it, how it's used, and what happens if something goes wrong. Like for us, that means like the vendor can only use our data to serve us, right? And because every one of the, obviously you have access to every one of the properties, you're leveraging AI across the board. Like we're in third-party business, so like even if we have all that access, like that client's access for that property is again, only limited to that property, and making sure that we leverage it to make that AI better for that particular property. So So yeah, it's one of those things where if there's ever a breach in that, or we feel like there's something that's not above water per se, that's a big red flag for us. And vague contract language, like quote unquote, this can be used to improve the model. Those are things that we look out for. Like, well, what do you mean? What data is going to be used to improve model? Like, and how are you using that? And more importantly, is this something that you're using nationally or specifically to this property for this client that we're leveraging you on?
That's a fantastic nugget. Everybody who's listening, use to improve the model in your contract, highlight that, or get AI to highlight that and say, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So let's pivot a bit and talk about metrics, the pilots or beta testing, and then the scaling. So that 30, 60, 90 day, what you were describing. What does an AI pilot look like in terms of success criteria, the test design? Who signs off to scale it? Is it a global team member or is it just one team member, et cetera? So if you could just talk a little bit about that, I think that would really tie into your plan that you outlined.
Yeah, I truly believe in A/B testing. I know it's as old as time, but anywhere that you're leveraging AI, whether again it's for facilities, for leasing, for whatever it might be, you have to do A/B testing. A team that's leveraging AI versus a team that's not, and don't just do it one time for one property versus one property and say, "Yep, ready to scale." Again, you have to test it in different markets. You have to test it on different product types. You have to test it at different properties, operating at different occupancies and previous goals. And that's where you'll find the opportunities where you can actually compare and provide enough data where everyone feels confident this is ready to scale. I know oftentimes we base our decisions purely on the fact that that the team liked it. Don't get me wrong, that's important. That's absolutely critical. The on-site team, our end users, should like the product, should feel comfortable with the product and want to use the product, but that cannot be the end-all be-all reason why we are scaling a product. It has to have statistical, meaningful change of improvement that can be tracked back to your company KPI to say, for instance, our lead to lease conversions went up by 15 points by leveraging AI, whereas on the other test sites where we weren't using it, we only went up 5% by telling them that you're competing with an AI, right? So that's still a 10% change that you can now directly affiliate with AI enablement of the team, right? So. And then same thing with work orders. If you're leveraging AI somewhere for facilities, okay, like what's our metric? What's our baseline that we're comparing against? And then did we have the outcome that we're looking for? So it's really, really important. A/B testing, I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, and this resonates with me so much because again, I'm, as the industry principal for the agentic workforce, I am hands in with the beta clients for our own AI. And I think that it's a 50-50 rate, in my opinion, of they have to like it. Because if they don't like it, they're not going to trust the data. They're not going to trust the thing to do that extra step for them. But also, you have to move the needle, right? Those KPIs are there to see the improvement that AI is able to sometimes do. So I love that. Move to a hot topic in the industry right now, integration. What level of integration with, let's say, property management systems or customer relationship management tools, maybe those work order systems we were talking about, is required to see ROI? Any lightweight paths that still deliver there?
Yeah, look, if whatever tool that you're using doesn't interact with the tools that your teams are using every day, like your PMS, your CRM, let's be honest, now it's just yet one more dashboard that someone has to log into. And someone else has to monitor, someone else has to audit, someone else has to put a report from. When you start adding all these multiple dashboards, we've done this long enough in the industry where we know that's where we tend to have lack of adoption, lack of buy-in, generally across the board, right? So seamless integration is so critical for us. I can't, the Apple model, like there's a reason why like they have everything all connecting within one, and that's the world we're growing up in. That's the world that we're living in today, right? So everything has to be seamless, and that's where you truly find the real wins, because when everything is all talking to all the other systems, not only are you going to have a better AI product, you're going to have a better user experience, because now it's just one place. This is the hub. This is where we work out of every single day when we clock in and when we clock out.
Yeah, it's funny that you just mentioned Apple, because like I mentioned, I was traveling for work And somebody had a laptop that I was trying to present on, and it was a Mac, and I literally didn't know what to do. I knew that there was a mouse pad, just like on my Dell here, but I am so not familiar with Apple. It's just a testament that they've really built a great ecosystem, and AI lives within their own ecosystem, just like, the Googles of the world, et cetera. It's just funny. It made me giggle at myself. I was like, maybe I need to learn that. All right, so let's look ahead. What's a belief that maybe have changed your mind about things from last year? And what's the one AI initiative every operator should start this quarter today?
Yeah, that's a good one. Let me think about that. So, okay. So I used to think, and I know there's probably people are gonna laugh at me. I used to think that the biggest risk with AI was that it was moving too fast. Like everything was happening way, way too fast. And I know it sounds kind of, counterintuitive to the conversation we're having, but what I've now changed my mind about is that waiting for perfect clarity is probably not the bigger risk. Like the answer, let me specify, the answer isn't rushing, it's starting deliberately. It's every operator knowing what is it that you're trying to solve for. Again, like truly knowing what is it you're trying to solve for, scoping that AI initiative for a quarter, that 30, 60, 90 day that we talked about, around that specific problem that you're trying to solve for, and then tying it to your direct operational KPI. And then from there, truly measuring and scaling it, right? So I don't believe now it's so much of an arms race, rather it's more of a, how do we make sure that the tools that we're using are actually going to be beneficial to us? Because there's too many tools to name out there, but not everyone is going to fit what you need today. And so asking the right questions is probably the biggest thing.
Awesome. That's a great way to end. However, I really would love to get back to Christopher, again, experienced multifamily director of asset management. He asked 50-50 on moving the needle. I love that. Integrations, let's talk about that. What about revenue? And he also just said, I love my Mac, by the way, it's awesome. So I don't really think that there's a question in there, but Christopher, thank you so much for engaging with us today. And thank you to Saad. You're a true partner in the industry, and I really hope that others were able to glean some really great insights about how to position your AI strategy. And again, we're excited to continue the series and offer up valuable conversations and topics that you can expect monthly. Please make sure to follow us on LinkedIn for those live updates. Thank you so much, and see you next month.